My name's Sonya Dreizler. My company's Solutions with Sonya. I enable financial services firms to launch, offer, and position SRI products, services. And that is not at all what I'm here to talk about today. Because when George asked me to give this talk, he didn't give me a lot of guidance. He let me just go. And I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. It's the thing that feels the most urgent to me right now. But before I get into that, I have an activity that I would like all of you to do, which will make sense once I start my talk. So bear with me here for a minute. I want you to think back to the very first time that you were hired to a job into financial services. And I want you to think of the top 3 factors that contributed to you getting hired into that job. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to think, and you have to come up with something because I'm going to make you share with your neighbor. So no getting on your phone. In fact, put them away. 20 seconds. Go ahead. I know that that wasn't much time, but now I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, introduce yourself. The person with the most letters in their first name gets to talk first, and I'm going to ask you to switch after about 20 seconds. Okay, now switch. The other person gets to talk. Okay, that's it. My turn. Come on back. I know that wasn't long enough, and I invite you to continue this conversation at the ice cream social later, because now it's my turn, and now what I asked you to think about will make sense, because I want to talk about landing my first job in financial services, and I almost don't need to tell the story because George did such a great job of explaining my career story, but I'm going to tell it anyways. And if you've heard me speak, you may have heard this before, but stay tuned because it has a surprise ending this time. So I was a recent college graduate living in San Francisco, post.com bust. There was not a lot of work to be had, and there was none in my chosen field of copy editing. So when I had the opportunity to interview as the executive assistant to the CEO of a BD RIA hybrid, I took it. And I didn't have any financial services experience. But I got ready for the interview. I polished my resume, hoping that my university pedigree would cover up for my lack of experience. I put on my only suit, one that I had bought at a garage sale, actually. Put on my red lipstick. That has not changed. And tried to look professional and went in and took this interview with the CEO, and we hit it off. And she was impressed by my resume, and she offered me a job on the spot. And I took a leap and took the job. She had a lot of faith in my ability to learn, and so she threw me right into the deep end. She had me, my first responsibility was as liaison between Advent Performance Reporting Services and our 50 financial advisors. To say that was a learning experience is an understatement. people were calling me and yelling at me about dividends and spin-offs and reinvested dividends, and I didn't know what any of that was. I was in so far over my head, I didn't even know that equity and stock were the same thing. It was bad. But I asked a lot of questions. I was online on Investopedia a lot. I learned quickly. I got my footing, and I got more responsibility because I did well there. More and more responsibility. I became VP. I eventually reorganized every single department in the firm and then became Chief Operating Officer. I spent 5 years doing that. And then when the CEO left, I threw my hat in the ring for that role, and I got it. And I was hired into the role, the same one that hired me, which was just an amazing moment. And then, as George said, when I was CEO, our firm was acquired by a larger firm, which leads me to where I am now. I take that Chief Operating Officer experience and the CEO perspective, put them together to help my financial services firm's clients navigate the SRI and impact investing space. So, it's a remarkable career story, right? A story of drive, determination, becoming one of the first, or one of the few, I should say, women executives in the field, and learning on the job. It is a great story. It's all those things. And also, it's a story of privilege. Because that interview I got with the CEO, and here's the surprise ending that I haven't told before. The interview I got with the CEO was because I was introduced to her by my dad, who's here. Hi, Dad. It's his 26th conference, and I'm very appreciative for that introduction. But that's privilege, right? Getting the interview is the privilege, and I got the job on my own, and I did well on my own, but just getting the opportunity was what got me started. And while that may seem unremarkable, introductions are very common in our industry, it's really not, because that's what privilege is. It grants you access without credentials. It lets a person like me with no experience go in and work at a financial services firm. And that privilege spans back generations. I grew up in a middle-class white family that benefited from the legacy of generations of access to financial services and housing and jobs and all of those things. And if we're being honest, often at the expense of people of color, probably. I don't know the entire history, but that's my guess. And my parents' relative financial stability allowed a life for me that was stable, healthy, expansive, which is great, and I so appreciate it. And it allowed me to grow and focus on my friends and focus on learning. And that's what every parent should be able to do for their kid, right? It allowed me to go on to school and to the university that helped me land that first job. So those are my 3 factors. My dad was in the business. I had this university degree that totally covered for my lack of skills in this area and my ability to appear professional. And all those things may seem, kind of standard for financial services, but I just want to stop and think about that for a moment, because to what extent do most Americans have access to these 3 factors? And how about to yours? To what extent do most Americans have the factors that got each of us our foot in the door? I just want to think about that for a moment. And so that's just an exercise to open our eyes and think for a moment. And while our eyes are open, I want you to look around the room and look around your table, and I want you to notice who's here, and I want to notice who's not here. And what I mean by that is, why do we have so few Latinas in this room? So few Black women? Why are there hardly any Indigenous folks in our community? There are very few people of color in our community, in relation to the American population. And what that means is we're missing a big piece, and we need all of those perspectives at our table to be able to solve the problems that we're working on. So this right here is my next-gen message. My generation wants equity, inclusion, and justice centered in all we do, and we want your help. This message is not just for the next-gen folks in the room, this message is for everybody, because to make an inclusive community, there's no easy button. It requires action on everybody's part, one person at a time, one action at a time. And so I'm going to ask you to consider some changes in two key areas. Your investing practices, which we'll start with, and your firm and work life. And the reason I want to start with your investing practices, hang on a second, is because I write a newsletter every week about impact investing. SRI is very good. You should sign up. And I give you very brief permission to get out your cell phone if you like, and you can text solutions to 345-345 to sign up. So I write this newsletter. It covers a variety of different topics every week. And the weeks that I write about the S part of ESG, about race, about immigration, those are the weeks that I get my high unsubscribe rates. And so what that tells me is that folks in our community who've signed up for an ESG content are all in for the E. And we're all in for the G. And we're super uncomfortable thinking about the S. And I want to change that. Because I really want us to care about people in the same way that we care about the atmospheric concentration of CO2, okay? And so I'm asking you all to invest with an eye towards social justice. How to do that? If you're a money manager, I want you to be thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion as you look at your investment opportunities. If you're a financial advisor, make sure your money manager is doing that. And all of us should be supporting the great shareholder engagement work in this area. I'll give you a resource for that later. And you should do it for the business case, because companies with diverse teams have better financial outcomes. But also, for the moral imperative, we manage a tremendous amount of money collectively, and we're responsible for that. And I would say that there's a moral and ethical imperative to move the needle in this issue. So next, your firm and your work life. And I want to talk about this because we can't go look at all these companies that we're investing in and not turn the mirror on ourselves, right? So some of my colleagues who are here today and I have been working on this and collecting some data. And some of those colleagues who are here, Renee Morgan, Danielle Burns, we've been collecting data from SRI companies about how diverse we actually are. And we'll put out a paper shortly with all that data, but I want to give you a little preview. We have a lot of work to do because I know we all care about diversity and inclusion, and we need to lead by example. And so I'm asking us all to make a few changes there too. So the next time you're at the decision-making table, I want you to notice who's not at the table, and then figure out how to bring their perspective to the table, or even better, bring them to the table, bring their voice. I want you to expand your circle. And here, I'm mostly talking to the white folks in the room. If everybody you listen to, whose opinions you value, the people you talk to every day, if they're mostly white, I'm going to ask you to intentionally expand your circle. Follow people of color on social media. Reach out and expand your circle so that you're getting more perspectives in your life. And talk about race. I'm not going to ask you to get comfortable because it's never comfortable. I'm uncomfortable right now talking about it, okay? But we can't solve an issue without being able to talk frankly about it, so get used to talking about race. And about the table, when I say diversity, I'm not trying to take anything away from the white men in the room. I don't want to take away your seat at the table. What I want, and what my generation wants, is to build a bigger table. a table that welcomes everyone. And I know I'm running short on time here, but I have a couple more slides and I'll go quick. So it's a couple learning suggestions. There's a group, many of you are in it, the Racial Justice Investing Working Group. So if you want to incorporate some of this into your investing, that's a really good place to start. I will send all of these to my newsletter list, or I'm happy to introduce you personally. The 2050 Trailblazers podcast is a really great way to hear stories about encouraging diversity in the financial planning profession, but it really covers financial services more generally. Sorry, losing my microphone. And start from season 1. It's very good. And then if you're ready to start talking about race, this book, So You Want to Talk About Race, is really good. It's so good, in fact, that I bought a bunch of copies to give away to anybody here who wants to take next steps. So come see me if you want to do that. No catch. You don't have to be my client. We don't even have to have a long, uncomfortable conversation about race. I'll just give it to you. So in conclusion, I just want to ask for one more thing. Sorry. I want to ask all of you to think bigger. Because when I say diversity, I'm not talking about hiring one person of color onto the management team, and I'm definitely not talking about shooting for 30% women on boards. We want representation. So when we're talking about women on boards, I want 50% or more. And my generation wants the community, the firms that we work with and we work for, and the communities we invest in to be reflective of the communities we serve and more broadly of the United States. So I'm asking for your help. Let's build a bigger table together. Thank you.